human mind is like a computer. No matter how efficient it may be, its reliability is only as great as the information fed into it.
That's a campaign promise.
Tell us the truth. Tell us the truth.
We mandate that the truth be told.
You're hearing it.
TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this live broadcast. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Thank you for joining us here on TNT, today's News Talk. Now, I'm going to welcome a very special guest onto the program. Very pleased to be able to have her for the time that we do today. Sonja van den Ende is joining us. She is a Dutch journalist. She has a very interesting story to tell. We also got her to comment on what's going to be a big event in Russia right now. Election season is happening. She's got a lot of experience on the ground in Donbass, especially, and we'll talk about previous elections, the referenda, the beginning of what they call the new regions. From a Western point of view, this is extremely controversial. Not so much when you pass over into this part of the world, Sonja, but welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, Sonja, I mean, for those people who don't know your story, how did you end up? How did you end up in this part of the world? And tell us your story about your first exposure to life in Donbass. And I want to talk about the elections coming up, and also your experience with election monitoring and understanding how that works, and what you see and how you can compare this to other elections around the world. But go ahead, Sonja.
Okay, well, I ended up 2 years ago. That was in March, 1 week after the start of the special military operation. I was asked to come to Russia to have there was a conference there. And then they said, okay, you have the opportunity as a journalist to go to the Donbass, because it was just started, just to see. It was actually just the beginning of everything. So I said, okay, and I went with a few other ones. There were not many that time, maybe 5, 6. And we went to, the first trip was actually going to Crimea, and then from Crimea we went to Kherson, so that was the first trip. We went to after that to Donetsk. And well, okay, it was quite an experience to see it. It was not really, not happening so much. We saw all the trucks going, all the soldiers going. It was actually quiet in compared to what I've experienced later on. Well, I came back, and then they said to me here in Russia, the people who invited me for the conference, look, we have some information that you better stay here, because maybe it's not safe for you to go back. Maybe the CIA is already notified that you were in the Donbass, and so just stay here a little while and then you will see what will happen. Well, this is now 2 years that I'm here and see what is happening. But okay, so I stayed on, and in the meantime waiting, and they said, okay, we have some more trips to go to the Donbass. You want to go? I said, sure, I want to go. So I went to all the Donbass, to Donetsk, to Luhansk, Novorossiya, as they call it now. And well, I was in Mariupol. That was there was still fighting at the port when I was there. I was in the city center. It was totally destroyed by the Ukrainians. And I was at the Azovstal factory 1 week after the liberation. We were the first Western journalists to enter. So yeah, that was really horrible what we saw there. And later on, I went back. Last year summer, I went back for a film, and we saw the truck. What was there? There were all the bodies in the truck. They were not there, of course, anymore, the bodies, but that was all happening there in the Azovstal. Yeah, I saw so many things. I can speak for hours, but I will not do that. And then they asked me to join with the referendum. That was in 2022, September. So it was, the referendum for the new republics to join Russia. And I went to the Luhansk People's Republic. I was an observer there. And what I can say and what I can see, it was well organized, the whole trip, because there were quite a lot of people. And we went all to the separate regions, and in Luhansk it was good organized, and we went to many polling stations. And what only I can say, and what I said already here in the media, and I wrote about it, it was really organized very good. It was democratic, because in the West they straight away said, oh, the soldiers there and they're pushing the people for voting. Well, that was not true, because the soldiers who were there, they were for our protection, because they were shelling somehow. And so that it's all a lie, we can say, what Western media is trying to say to the people in Europe. And then the second election came up, the real election for parliament, for the Duma in the new regions. And then I went to Kherson. So that was a long time, 5 days I spent there. And also, again, very well organized. And you could see at the polling stations that they even had 4 political parties you could vote on: the Communist, United Russia, and 2 other parties, the LPR, I think, and another one from there somehow. So it was good. I mean, people say, you can only vote for one party, or maybe only the party from President Putin you can vote from. Well, this is not true, because in the Donbass regions, there were a lot of communists. So the Communist Party was the second place. So, I mean, that's fair, I think. And what I saw in the Donbass is that I think the European Union did a very terrible job all these years, because they spend a lot of money there. But when I went there, and even I went to the places that were not destroyed by the war, it looked terrible. I think the European Union, or Zelensky, put all the money in his own pocket. That is what I guess, because there was nothing done. There were still factories from the 1970s, 1980s, and it was horrible. I think it's horrible how the people lived there. There was no progress. And I think now it's very crucial that they have voted there, because now it's Russia, Novorossiya. So Russia started renovating already, rebuilding in Mariupol. We can see all the beautiful apartments there already. And hopefully they will do it like in Luhansk city. I was there 3 weeks ago. All other places, because a lot of places are really destroyed, because when the Ukrainians left, they had this tactic that they destroyed everything. So I heard that many times from the people there, like in Volnovakha and so on. So they destroyed actually also apartment buildings, roads, you name it, they destroyed it. And the people or the media, in the Western media, is saying that, the Russians are, destroying schools or destroying hospitals. Well, this is not true. And this is really so horrible. There are so many lies in Western media that it's awful. Really, it's unbelievable for me what I heard. Mm-hmm.
And Sonja, so there's been, just to confirm, from 2014 till the present day, in parts of the Donbass, there's been continuous shelling and artillery strikes from Ukrainian forces against civilians in Donetsk and Luhansk, pretty much continuously, although the frequency of it might vary depending on the different times, but it hasn't stopped, has it? Can you confirm that?
No, it hasn't stopped, and especially in Donetsk city. Hopefully now that with the liberation of Avdiivka, it will stop, because I heard that the Ukrainian army was like there behind or in Avdiivka shelling the HIMARS, because when I was there, the first time it started was in 2022 in July. Before that it was reasonable quiet, but then the HIMARS came in and other NATO weapons, but the HIMARS, they were the worst. And they were shooting nearly every day HIMARS on the city of Donetsk, and this is so horrible. What you see there, what you saw there, the markets were, people killed in the markets, on the streets, the hospitals, schools. It's only civilians. It's horrible. All the time I try to say that, the civilians, they are the victims. It's not the battlefield. It's civilians. So this was continuing until, recently, when Avdiivka was liberated. So I hope that, it will stop. That's the hope for Donetsk city, because they are really at the target there. I was in Luhansk recently, but that was pretty okay. Luhansk is now okay, but cities like Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, they were hit very terribly, and you can still hear a little bit where the front line is, but nowadays it's pretty good. So the Russian army, liberated quite a lot these days. So very good for the people there, because finally they can start rebuilding, I hope for them, and start having a normal life after 10 years of war. And it's horrible.
And so Sonja, a lot of people had seen your work, especially in the early days of this previous round of hostilities from February 2022, but you were one of the first kind of on the ground, really giving really good sort of raw reporting and insights and debunking a lot of the sort of misinformation, the lies that were being published by Western media. But one of the ideas that's been put out in the Western media, and perhaps you can speak to this, is this idea that somehow the residents of Kherson, the Donbass, the new republics of the Donbass, even Crimea, I've heard it, Melitopol, Mariupol, that somehow they're being forced to vote in the elections against their will. And that these are sham elections. I mean, this is more or less the implication, the accusations right across Western punditry and media, pretty much continuously for the last year and a half. How much is there any truth to this? How would you assess those accusations?
Well, they're falsified. There are lies, because I went to Kherson and I went 5 days. I went to a lot of polling stations, well, I think 10, 50, maybe 20, I lost count. And nobody was forced to go there. People, when we came there, the people were in line. There were no soldiers or police or something, just the people waiting to get to vote. And I spoke to them, to the residents, and they were really happy. And they were really, some polling stations even had music, and so happy. They were so happy. So, I mean, it's a big lie what I heard. And this is also the point that they are now trying to target me. They try to, in the West, they target me like in 2022 already, because they say I'm spreading lies about this. Well, they are the ones who are spreading the lies, because first of all, they were not there. This is the whole problem with Western media. Nobody, except me and a few other ones, like a German Thomas Röper and some other journalists from France, and we were there. We were the first ones to go in and see everything, actually what happened. And until today, we know what the progress is and not. So they are not there. No one from the Western mainstream media is in the Donbass. So, they cannot say anything actually, because they don't know it. So, I mean, they are spreading lies. That's the whole point. The people were not forced. They are, they are democratically voted for what has happened now. And they all the time told me, we are so happy that finally, after 10 years of war, we can vote in freedom. So this is what they said.
Yes. And also I wanted to ask you this too, because a lot of people in the West wouldn't really have any understanding of, let's say, how people identify in these regions, predominantly Russian-speaking regions, formerly Eastern Ukraine, now have been more or less absorbed, repatriated, however you want to describe it. Some will say annexed by the Russian Federation. How do these people identify in general? What's your observation? Do they identify as mixed Ukrainian Russian? Do they identify as Russian, ethnically, nationally, and so forth? How do you what do you observe? I'm sure you've had conversations about this with people in the region, but what's your understanding of that?
Well, the majority of the people I spoke to are identifying themselves as Russians. And of course, in elder generations, they experienced the Soviet Union. But also you have young ones there, so they didn't experience the Soviet Union, but they all identify themselves as Russian. Why? Because they speak Russian at home. They have Russian culture, they commemorate World War II, but also the culture, maybe the food, dancing, and so on. So they are really identify themselves as Russians and not as Ukrainians. And so this is, I think, the main reason they are, so angry. And this is all why the war, one of the points why the war had started, because they were forced to speak Ukrainian, forced to learn Ukrainian. And they were told to forget everything what had to do with to be Russian or the Russian language. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's like when you from the UK or I from the Netherlands are told, oh, you cannot speak Dutch or English anymore because now you will belong to France, for instance. So, I mean, this is how the people felt, and yeah, and I spoke to many of them, and yeah, they all were very happy and straight away, because there was the period that they could get a Russian passport, and I think that many of them, the majority who stayed there, they will have a Russian passport, and they identified themselves as Russians, and yeah, this is the whole problem, and the Kiev regime didn't accept that, and this is one of the big issues, and the West doesn't understand it. The West thinks, they are Ukrainian because it was Ukraine there, so they are Ukrainian, but they don't understand this whole issue, and they say, oh, they may be old communist or something. I don't know what they say exactly, but I know for sure the people feel Russian, and this is, they are now Russians, so that's good for them.
And I know you yourself and others during previous elections, and perhaps you can give us a little more details on this. There were reports of there was shelling during the elections, during when the polls were open in some of these regions previously. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kherson and Donetsk come to mind here. And so it was a case of, is this a case of, if you can comment on this, you have any knowledge or experience of it, that the Ukrainian armed forces knew there were elections, they knew there were people coming out to vote those days, and yet the shelling continued on civilian areas. Can you speak to this? Do you have any knowledge previously of this? And if you do, it'd be great to know a little bit more about those reports.
Yes, I heard. I was not there personally, but I heard from another journalist, Thomas Reuper. He was in Kherson with the referenda, and also an RT crew was there. And the hotel, it was shelled where they were staying, the whole hotel, and I think one RT crew member was severely wounded. He was laying there under the rubble. And I heard from people who went to Donetsk that there was shelling as well. I mean, Donetsk is continuously was shelled, so that's somehow it might seem very strange, but here it's normal there. So even though when there were observers, they even shelled as well, and this is unbelievable, because then the people have the proof. The Ukrainian regime is shelling us, and we are observers here. So, but unfortunately, myself, during the election, I didn't experience this, because I was with the referendum in Luhansk, and that was pretty quiet there. Severodonetsk, I wasn't. I was in the capital of Luhansk, so Luhansk city. But yeah, there was shelling, and especially Kherson. That was horrible, because Murat Khatiev from RT, I think he was there, and somehow his cameraman was wounded. So during the election, imagine this.
I ask about this, Sonja, because if you're watching Western media, you're not going to get any details of anything like these sort of incidents. I mean, it's just not reported at all. But it is really, I think, extraordinary, some of these stories, and very telling as well, putting it into context, because, in terms of, let's say, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the various international institutions, Western jurist institutions, there's a lot of indictments against the Russian Federation for war crimes. Even they've attempted a genocide case, I believe, as well, in one of these courts as well, but nothing from the Ukrainian side. And there seems to be a lot of evidence as well, but those cases aren't being filed. There's no political pressure coming against. Go ahead.
And there's one case, especially one case. I went to the Yelenovka prison. Maybe you do remember. There were the Azov Steel members, the Azov battalion members. They were kept, and they were sent to the Yelenovka prison in Donetsk. And after a while, they shelled the Yelenovka prison, and Ukraine straight away said, "Oh, the Russians did it." So we went there, and actually, what happened? They found pieces of HIMARS. Well, the Russians don't have HIMARS, so it's obviously that Ukraine shelled its own prison, or its own, was Russia now, but they shelled the prison with their own Azov battalion members. And they asked the Red Cross to come in, but they hesitated, and also I think they asked the UN for an investigation, the Russians did. Well, also not done, of course. They asked it 2-3 times and nobody came. Instead, they shelled a hotel in Donetsk city. There were journalists there, and I think one member of the Red Cross was there. He dared to come, but it was shelled, so they had to, be removed again, these people. But unfortunately, there were no wounded. But I mean, they shelled the hotel and they shelled the prison. So imagine this. And in the West, they are saying, Russia shelled the prison because there are Azov battalion members there, so they just want to kill them instead of having them a trial somehow. So this is what they did. But it was obviously, we saw the HIMARS shells, so the
That's
pieces of the
interesting.
HIMARS.
It sort of reflects the Hannibal directive, the sort of policy by the IDF, the Israeli forces, to rather than to pay the political cost or capital of a hostage or a POW, any exchanges or anything like that, they just opt to basically kill any Israeli prisoners because they don't want to sort of allow them to be used as leverage by the other side. It's kind of, you could say in this case, you're talking about Ukraine killing its own POWs in a prison held in Donetsk. I mean, it's a type of a Hannibal directive decision, strategic decision made. I mean, pretty incredible. And more incredible, Sonja, that didn't get really top line coverage in the Western mainstream media, because as a journalist, you can't get a better story than this. I mean, this has just got every single element of a headline story, but yet most people in the West, they have no idea that it even happened. So that's extraordinary. And I think that's down to the work of yourself and your colleagues and those people who are, working this beat, who are covering events in this region, and doing it in an objective way. Some will argue that because you're there means you're automatically not being objective. You probably have these accusations all the time. So, like, what do you do at this point? What do they expect? That you just can't go? That the only way to be objective is not to go to the region? Because that's that's the implication, isn't it?
Yeah,
From
and
your
also
critics. Go ahead.
Yeah, the big implication is that you are sanctioned, or you get on all terrible dead lists or EU disinformation lists or whatever. I don't know anymore what lists I am on. I'm for sure on the dead list, the Miro Vorets dead list. I'm on somehow a new one now in the UK, MON-FRI list. It's I don't know. Yeah, it's. I'm on the watch list of the CIA. I'm on the watch list of my own country, AIVD it's called. It's on something like the CIA or MI5, Bellingcat, you name it. My bank account is closed. Well, they wanted to get my property, but thank God I got rid of it already before they anyhow came to it. So yeah, this is the consequence, and I'm for sure when I go back to the Netherlands, they didn't say it openly, but I know when I come back, they will probably investigate me and maybe a trial somehow, because in Germany, journalists get up to 3 years imprisonment already. So I mean, it's unbelievable. As a journalist, you get prison for reporting. Imagine this. Yeah.
Well, I think it has to do with the information that you're conveying. It's disrupting the sort of monopoly on the narrative and what's happening. Listen, it shouldn't be about politics. It should really just be about the truth. And I think if all sides of the argument, all sides of the conflict have access to as much good quality information as possible, I think this can only be a benefit to everybody involved in the long run, because eventually the truth is going to permeate, and hopefully that's going to inform the policy decisions of either those people in the West and NATO countries, but in Russia as well, and any other third-party countries, and Ukraine for that matter. But that's not what's happening, Sonja. The information is a chokehold, isn't there, on information, depending on where you are in the world and what you have access to. And I'm going to say the people in the West are the ones who are not receiving a lot of information. Their information funnel is being throttled in the West. It's not the same. I don't think the same is true in Russia. It's pretty much an open book on all sides. What's being said in the West is accessible. What's being said in the East is accessible, but not in the West. Only what's being said in the West is accessible in the West. And that's a serious problem, not just for diplomats, but for government officials, for everybody involved in this. But look, we got a couple of minutes left, Sonja. But yeah, your final thoughts you like to share with us before we break?
Well, now the presidential elections are coming, and well, I hope President Putin wins. That's I can say, because he's, I think, very qualified to run the country again in this terrible situation Russia is in. I hope peace will come somehow, but I think peace will not come because, as we know, Europe is in the war mode. They are in the war economy. They are in a war propaganda, even though they don't have enough weapons and enough soldiers, I think. But the West is totally radicalized, and I hope people in the West finally wake up and say, hey, you governments, what are you saying? You want war? I mean, we had wars, 2 world wars we had. You want a third one? I mean, this is what they are arguing about in the government and in the media. So I think they are totally insane. Sorry, my words. But if you read some Western media, especially the Dutch or the English media, it's insane what they are saying. They want war. And this is all I can say. They don't want diplomacy, they don't want peace, nothing, just war. And I hope people can do something about it, the normal people, because they are the ones who have to fight and not their government members. So they have to wake up and say, hey, it's enough. We're going on the street, do something. And yeah, let's hope something will happen, that they wake up in time before it's too late.
And let's hope that the war comes to an end soon as well. There's a lot of people suffering on all sides of the conflict, and the sooner they come to some kind of a peace arrangement, I think the better, at least in the short term. They can iron out the rest of it in due course. But yeah, we'd like to see peace negotiations in this theater, but also in Gaza as well, in other parts of the world.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Sonja van den Ende, I really appreciate you joining us on TNT, today's News Talk this week. It's been a fabulous discussion.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks. Bye.
That's our pleasure. There she goes, ladies and gentlemen, Sonja van den Ende. You want to be following her work wherever you can find it on social media, on X, Twitter, or Telegram, or any of these platforms. Is definitely a journalist that you want to be watching. Independent journalist who's going to give you really the unvarnished truth as she sees it through her eyes. What more can you ask for these days? Let's take a break right now. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by our global affairs analyst, Basil Valentine, for more updates and key updates on the Middle East and much more. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Stay right there. We'll be back in a few.
Speaking on the issues that impact. This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.